Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There's some stuff we've got to talk about this week, a decent amount of stuff. So if you could, please do hit the like button. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also have some updates on Twitter and Blue Sky in terms of our research and the broadcast. So you can check us out there if you guys are so inclined. And of course, we have our website, Tochnyi.info, which is where we post our articles and all kinds of great stuff. So check out Tochnyi.info for more in-depth research. So without any further delay, I will present the news. That will be preceded by Mr. German aid to Ukraine. And then we'll discuss the Russian economy with Stanimir. Then cover a whole bunch of other stuff that happened this week on top of the news. And then we'll do Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. And now the news.
These are the main headlines as of March 8th, 2026. First up, we have operations. Ukrainian Luty strike drones hit a Russian chemical facility in Kirovo-Chepetsk in the Kirov region. Footage shared by the XL Nova Plus Telegram channel and recorded by local witnesses showed the aftermath of the early morning March 4th strike, including smoke rising above the site and a fire burning on the plant's grounds. Initial reports said that the target was the Kirovo-Chepetsk chemical plant, a major enterprise within Uralchem that produces mineral fertilizers such as ammonium nitrate and urea, along with other industrial products. The regional governor confirmed that drones had struck the area and said they were reporting no casualties. He also said emergency crews were still working at the scene and described the situation as under control. The governor further warned that people who share photos or videos from the site of Ukrainian drone strikes could face legal consequences. The plant is considered strategically important for the region and is one of Russia's leading suppliers of mineral fertilizers, with output used in both agriculture and industry. The attack happened more than 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine's border, and the full scale of the damage is still being determined. During the night of March 2nd, an attack by unmanned aerial vehicles in Novorossiysk Bay struck the Russian frigate Admiral Essen, a Project 11356R vessel. OSINT analysts at Cyberbaroshna assessed the main impact landed on the ship's midship superstructure, causing serious damage to key systems. The blast set off the PK-10 passive countermeasure launchers mounted along the sides of the superstructure. These systems are used to release heat decoys and dipole reflectors intended to shield the ship from incoming missiles. The TK-25 electronic warfare suite was also put out of action. That system is used to detect hostile radar emissions and deploy active jamming. The frigate's MR-90 target illumination radars were also damaged, affecting an essential part of their air defense and missile guidance process by reducing its ability to track airborne targets in the final phase of interception. The blast wave and flying debris also likely affected the Frigate M2M surveillance radar, which is used for long-range detection of air and surface threats. The Admiral Essen carries Caliber NK cruise missiles, which Russia has used extensively in their war against Ukraine. A Russian Project 1241 Molnia missile boat was also struck in the same attack. The most serious damage was recorded in the stern, where important propulsion equipment is installed. The affected section contains the aft engine room and the main engines. It also includes two 30mm AK-630M artillery mounts, which are used for close-range air defense and for engaging small targets near the ship. The impact area also covers diesel generators that provide stable electrical power for onboard systems, meaning disruptions there could leave the vessel without power. Crew spaces in the same part of the boat, including the dining area for personnel, were also damaged. These boats are armed with P-270 Moskit anti-ship missiles. The Black Sea Fleet currently has two of them, the R-60 and the Nemberezhnie Chelny, while a third vessel, the Strelok, is undergoing sea trials outside the Black Sea. In 2024, Ukrainian drones managed to sink the Ivanovets, another boat of the same project. The Ukrainian company Temerland has unveiled the Gnome-D ND ground drone platform designed to launch FPV drones. The company said the drones can be launched and controlled remotely, either through radio links or optical communication signals. The vehicle uses a combined wheel-tracked chassis intended to maintain mobility across both rough terrain and in difficult field conditions. Operators control both the launch and flight of the drones directly with an FPV drone controller. The developers say that this setup makes it possible to carry strike drones closer to Russian positions before launch, extending their effective reach and improving operational results. They also say that ground drones can be hidden further forward and used to launch drones from concealment once opposing forces move into range. Images released by the company show the Gnome ND carrying FPV drones. The presentation follows a February development in which the Ukrainian Ratel H ground robotic system was also adapted to carry FPV drones using fiber optic control. Up next, we have economy and aid. On Friday, the steering committee of the Ukraine Investment Framework approved a new package of 8 programs for Ukraine with a combined value of 1.5 billion euros. The framework operates within the European Union's broader Ukraine facility and is designed to bring in both public and private investment for the country's recovery and reconstruction. The EU delegation to Ukraine said that for the first time, the framework will direct funding toward dual-use technologies and strategic industries, reflecting a commitment previously announced by the European Commission at the EU-Ukraine Investment Conference last November. The package is intended to generate $3.4 billion in additional investment for key sectors, including energy, education, communications, agriculture, and small business. It will also support the construction of shelters at educational institutions. The sixth meeting of the steering committee was led by the European Commission and included representatives of EU member states, observers from the European Parliament, Ukraine's government and parliament, Norway's, and major European and international financial institutions. The programs will be carried out by financial institutions already cooperating with the European Commission in Ukraine, including the EBRD, the IBRD, the KfW, and the IFC, along with new partners such as Finerva and BPI France, as well as CDP. The EU delegation said the framework has now assigned 8.4 billion euros, equivalent to 90% of its overall volume, and that these commitments are expected to unlock around 25 billion in investment in Ukraine. The framework itself provides financial instruments worth 9.3 billion euros, while the full Ukraine facility is 50 billion. Ukraine resumed exporting electricity for the first time since last year, marking a notable shift as the country begins to recover from a severe energy disruption brought on over the winter by Russian air attacks. The state grid operator said exports started on March 5th, the first such transfer since November of 2025. Earlier on Thursday, Expro Consulting reported that Ukraine sent 12 megawatt-hours of electricity to Moldova overnight, a very small volume but one seen as symbolically important. At the same time, specialists cautioned that the power system remains vulnerable. The director of the Kyiv Energy and Climate Lab said the development showed that the crisis had only eased somewhat this week and should be understood as a temporary improvement in the power balance rather than a lasting solution. Stronger output from nuclear plants and renewable generation are the main reasons that exports became possible again. On March 6, the U.S. Treasury granted a 30-day waiver allowing Indian refiners to receive Russian crude that was already sitting on tankers offshore, with unloading in India permitted from the 5th of March through the 4th of April. The measure applies to cargoes that had accumulated at sea while Washington spent the past year pressing New Delhi to reduce and eventually stop purchases of Russian oil. The Treasury Secretary said the waiver is not expected to deliver any major new financial gain to Moscow because it covered oil that had already been loaded and left without buyers. Even so, clearing those shipments removes a significant burden for Russia, since by January of 2026, around 140 million barrels of Russian crude, valued at around $3 billion had built up offshore after Indian demand fell sharply. That backlog created a practical problem for Moscow because production could not simply be paused. With its land-based storage already filled, Russia had been relying on pipelines and tankers from the Shadow Fleet to hold excess supply. Letting those cargoes move to India eases that pressure, even if it does not involve fresh contracts beyond the stranded volumes. In effect, the waiver helps clear a logistical bottleneck that had formed after months of U.S. pressure. Up next, we have international relations. Leading agricultural groups from Ukraine presented a shared position in Brussels on how the country's farm sector should be integrated into the European Union, calling for a transition that is predictable and economically sustainable. The Ukrainian Agribusiness Club said that the associations are seeking a transition period of at least 10 years beginning from the date of Ukraine's formal accession to the EU. During that time, Ukrainian farmers intend to fully align with European rules, including standards for plant protection products, fertilizers, and the implementation of Natura 2000 environmental requirements. The proposal also calls for Ukrainian farmers to receive access to common agricultural policy support mechanisms on terms comparable to those available to EU member states, with payments increasing gradually over time. It highlights the need for EU structural funding to modernize infrastructure for trade liberalization, covering products that meet European safety requirements. The president of the Ukrainian Agribusiness Club said that the model should be seen as a stabilizing measure for the wider European food system, arguing that a controlled transition would help protect both the single market and European farmers. He warned that if Ukraine were pushed to abandon essential crop protection products too quickly before workable substitutes are available, producers would turn to buying approved alternatives inside the EU, which could lead to shortages and higher prices on the European market. The chairman of the Ukrainian Agrarian Council drew attention to the risks facing small and medium-sized farms, which make up around 75% of the sector. He said that years of war have already seriously weakened Ukrainian farmers, and that a rushed integration process could wipe out a large share of the sector. He added that the consequences would go beyond agriculture, affecting rural jobs, tax income, and Ukraine's broader economic resilience. The Agricultural Association said they hope for open discussions with their European counterparts that would make it possible to shape an integration model beneficial to both Ukraine and the European Union while preserving the production capacity of both sides. And last item this week, another 300 Ukrainian service members and 2 Ukrainian civilians have been returned from Russian captivity. The president of Ukraine said that the group includes personnel from the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the National Guard, and the State Border Guard Service, including enlisted troops, non-commissioned officers, and officers. He said that they fought in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions, as well as in the defense of Mariupol. Most had been held for more than a year, and some had been in captivity since 2022. The Coordination Headquarters for the Treatment of Prisoners of War said the exchange on Friday, March 6 was the second and final stage of a swap carried out under the Geneva Agreements. Returning Ukrainians will be taken to medical facilities for examinations, treatment, and rehabilitation. They will be provided with support, have documents processed, and be paid all state benefits owed to them. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, and the next segment would be me. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. And since I wasn't there last week, I will do the news from the week before also. And just before, I really have to say it always amazes me when they're saying that they release prisoners who were in prison inside Russia or in captivity inside Russia since 2022. I always have to imagine, like, how much do these people actually know? I mean, imagine you get captured in the first weeks or first months of the war before the first big counteroffensive in 2022. And you get released like 4 years later and like know nothing which has been going on. It's just mind-boggling to me. And yeah, I just really wanted to say that. Sorry. First news item. Sorry. We are starting with the news from last week, Tuesday, and the German city of Hamburg, which is donating 29 generators and suitable connection cables worth 500,000 euros to Kyiv. The Hamburg-based energy supply company Hamburger Energiewerke and other public companies in the region are contributing additional generators worth 120,000 euros. These donations will supply several thousand households and public buildings in Kyiv and the surrounding region with electricity. And as of mid last week, around 20 of these 29 plus generators have already been delivered. On Thursday last week, I reported that the German Federal Agency for Technical Relief, THW, has carried out a donation of a total of 20 generators to the Mykolaiv region. 10 will be used in critical infrastructure facilities in the city of Mykolaiv, while the other 10 will be used across the region. A day later, on Friday, I reported that the German-Ukrainian Association UADE e.V. recently collaborated with the association Meerbusch Hilft e.V., to send nearly 9 tons of aid supplies worth 122,000 euros to Ukraine. Multiple generators with total output of 301 kilowatts, electricity storage units, a heating device, and various other pieces of equipment and goods were also included in the shipment. Moving on to Monday this week, and for this one I want to talk about Helsing's loitering munitions HX2 and its deployment in Ukraine. I hope that's okay. After several weeks of criticism, for example, via news articles from Bloomberg, Welt, and other media around the world, you have probably noticed some hype, or at least some of you probably noticed some hype, and very good reporting in the media and especially on social media on Monday and the days after that. And I want to give you some context and my 2 cents about it. First of all, it is of course very good that the loitering munitions are being used again and continue to be used and are inflicting losses on the Russian occupiers. But I'm really confused by the recent hype and exaggeration of the positive news. So there were plenty of social media accounts and also media articles written, for example, in Militani, but also in German and other Ukrainian media, about Russians increasingly complaining about the HX2 and how good it performs in Ukraine. And the source of all of that, and that's what I wanted to say, is a single Russian Telegram account that has posted a negative comment about the HX2. And the author of the Telegram account of the post did really nothing, like provide no details at all, except for an image of the remains of a used up HX2. And he stated that the loitering munitions are being used behind the front line and sometimes hit their target. That's all. And this has created a huge amount of positive reporting, and the Russians are increasingly it's really just a single Telegram account which has been saying that and is saying nothing else. And but in addition, I wanted to say that even before the negative press coverage by Bloomberg and others in the recent weeks, the HX2 had seen plenty of successful uses and inflicted sometimes heavy losses on the Russian military. So that's not really anything new, even if he says that they're using it and sometimes hit their targets. It's not if the HX2 had been completely useless before and hadn't hit anything at all. Quite the opposite, actually. And that's also what I wanted to talk about, because there was so much negative press about it. And some things were blown up. Some things were actually true, at least to my knowledge. The thing is, when there were, for example, talking of hit rates between 1/4 or 1/3 of all drones, like just hitting their targets, so 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 3 completely missing their targets. I mean, Ukraine got, per Helsing statement, and I'm just quoting their statement, 1,000 units. Yeah. So let's say that 1/4 they used all of their drones, and 1 out of 4 drones just hit their target. That's still 250 targets hit, right? So it's not if these were completely useless, and I think a lot of people got that wrong, based off the hit rates displayed. And and just going back to the Telegram post, the Telegram post didn't tell us anything about any updates or upgrades being implemented on the system, the circumstances in which the recent strikes took place, or anything else relevant to actually determine whether the HX2, which has been heavily criticized over the recent weeks, has actually been improved. Yeah. And it only tells us that the Ukrainian military is still or again using the HX2 to strike Russian targets in the rear area, which is the whole reason why they have been deployed. So it's nothing really special. And which might mean that either the deliveries never stopped or that they have been resumed, which in the latter case would, of course, indicate that they actually have been improved. And that's all. So I understand that people are excited about this. There's currently no reason to overhype the recent news coverage. And I just wanted to make that clear, because it was literally like dozens of very big accounts saying that the Russians are complaining so much about them, and a lot of people confused about the bad news coverage in the recent weeks and now the very good one. And the very good one is really just completely blown up based off one single Telegram post, and that's all. A lot of text for this. I hope that was okay. Usually I'm not doing that, but I really felt the need to do that. On Wednesday, I reported that the local police force in the German city of Bonn is donating 2 urgently needed Ford S-Max police vehicles to its Ukrainian twin city of Kherson. The vehicles were handed over at the end of February and will be delivered to their new workplace in Ukraine shortly. And as far as I understood it, they were actually requested by Kherson, so they will put them to good use. On the same day, the German government donated 10 Volkswagen Amarok pickups and 3 Volkswagen Crafter vans to the Ukrainian railways. And I'm sorry, you know how I'm with Ukrainian names. I'm not even trying to pronounce the Ukrainian name. A state-owned railway company in Ukraine to support the company in responding rapidly after Russian shelling. And last but not least, another bad news. On Friday, the German media Spiegel reported that some nations had originally committed to providing 30 PAC-3 missiles to Ukraine. And I hope everyone here remembers that. Pistorius went out in public recently and said, I think it was about a month ago, and said if other nations are going to provide Ukraine with 30 PAC-3 missiles total for the Patriot air defense system, then Germany is going to deliver an additional 5. So that was the deal. And about a week or 2 weeks after the statement, I asked the MOD, and they were still not having all the commitments, and they were also not telling me whether they actually deliver the missiles, regardless whether they get all the commitments needed or not. And now, about 4 weeks later, Spiegel is reporting that at least some of these nations had actually now withdrawn their pledges, which is crazy to me. And it actually shows us how effed up the situation here in Europe currently is, when we're not even getting together 30 PAC-3 missiles. I know PAC-3 is much more rare than PAC-2 and other variants, but still, it shows us how really, really bad the situation is right now. And Spiegel also reported that Ukrainian officials assume that at least 5 or the 5 PAC-3 missiles offered by Germany will be delivered, but nothing has been officially confirmed, neither to me nor to Spiegel. And last but not least, let me just make sure it's actually muted. It is perfect. Since Joseph always makes me feel guilty after week when I don't show you a video of German supplied weapon systems in Ukraine, I am pleased to be able to tick that off this week, to be honest. The 223rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment. Sorry, my headset died. I hope you can hear me now. I quickly changed to a new one. They had a new video which features longer and partly very detailed shot of. Hold on. Okay, we can hear you. Thank you. Very detailed shot of IRIS-T SLM and SLS launchers, the TRM-4D air surveillance radar, and the TOC of an IRIS-T SLM fire unit in their service. The video also includes several interceptor launches. So far, Germany has delivered 9 IRIS-T SLM fire units, including 27 IRIS-T SLM launchers and 18 IRIS-T SLS launchers to Ukraine, with another 3 to 4 IRIS-T SLM fire units, each consisting 3 SLM and 2 SLS launchers, expected to be delivered throughout the year. And I cut the video down to only show the interesting bits. So basically, when you see something other than people talking, and plan to release a full English translation of the entire 5+ minute long video ASAP on my social media channels. But yeah, that takes a bit of time, and that's it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph, and I will quickly grab a cable to load my my headset. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gao. I love a good video. This is definitely a good video. Yeah.
Hey, they blurred it as well.
Yeah, that's smart. Up next, we're going to talk a little bit about the Russian economy with Mr. Stanimir Dobrev. So I've got 2 things for Stanimir before his general update. The first is an article that was released, or I should say a blog post, but it's a blog post about something that was released, I want to say, to Russian media circles. So Vladimir Milov, a former Russian deputy energy minister, is talking about the slowing of military production. And that's something that Stanimir talks about a little bit. So I just wanted to very briefly cover the main point of the article. The core argument was that there was an earlier surge in production driven by massive state spending, but there was no modernization that happened during this period. They didn't increase production by modernizing. So now production is contracting, and the reason is that it's facing pressure from multiple sides. Sanctions are driving prices up. The state controls the profit margins, and the profit margins are low and inflation's high, so they're kind of just not really making a lot of money. And there's high borrowing costs to do a lot of this is heavy upfront investment, and the government's payments are being delayed. So he basically says that Russia can still make a lot of weapons, but the system is very financially strained, and the current situation doesn't seem sustainable. So, Stanimir, do you have any kind of additional thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't say they didn't do any modernization. They have done importing of equipment to produce more defense armaments, but generally, yes, what they've done is either replace existing heavy machinery that they had with alternatives, because they can no longer get support or parts for the Western machinery that they used to use, or they've been basically expanding through other means the production output they could. But I wouldn't say entirely that they didn't import modern equipment. They have been importing modern equipment. They have been successfully sanction busting. There have been cases of importing things from Taiwan and Japan, and also from Europe. I think Daniela, our contributor, covers those very closely. But overall, as a whole, yes, they've been dependent on increasing defense spending and defense production by just throwing money at the problem. And yes, currently there are issues when it comes to defense production because the money isn't there anymore. And also, costs have gone up. The other thing we've noticed is that increases in defense production have been sporadic. We've seen decreases over the past several weeks, several months. And we've seen also in February, in January, we saw that production of munitions was down by 6% when compared to the previous month. Now, I have to add the caveat that January in 2026 had less working days than January in 2025. I think the difference is 15 to 17, but that's not enough to cover a growth by several percent to a decrease by 6%, because not everything shuts down for these holidays. And the other thing I have to add is that Russian defense companies aren't profitable, even with this much money being thrown at them. The prices at which they're selling, or they haven't covered their corruption issues, but they're basically not making a profit. We recently saw a big case where in Taganrog, the local aircraft company that produces, I think, Beryevs, was basically operating at a steep loss compared to its entire revenue for the year. I think they were close to 30 or 40% of the revenue was just lost. So that's the other thing that's happening. And they've also had to recapitalize Promsvest Bank, I think, 2 times last year by 60 billion twice, because the Russian defense industry, which uses that bank as their primary source of borrowed funds, couldn't repay its loans, and they had serious losses. So yeah, the Russian defense procurement sector is getting exhausted, and it's not profitable, and there's not enough money to increase spending as much as they did in 23 and 24 and 25. It's just no longer the case. So yeah, we should see a plateau of defense production, and also we should see maybe more spending having to be sent just to keep this industries afloat, because currently, like I said, they're not making money.
Okay, thanks, Stanimir. Yeah, I thought that article was like a good opportunity to have a broader overview of the situation. So thanks for that update. And the next topic is sort of a political thing that happened, which is the ex-deputy defense minister of Russia, Ruslan Salikov, and a close associate of Shoigu, was arrested on corruption-related charges. Investigators say he led a group that embezzled state funds from 2017 to 2024 and charged him with 12 counts of embezzlement and money laundering and bribery. So yeah, I'll let you describe the meaning of behind such a high-profile arrest.
So yeah, he was one of the people who didn't get jailed when they replaced Shoigu from the defense ministry. And he was with Shoigu from earlier years because, for example, Timur Ivanov joined Shoigu's management team, I think, when Shoigu was the governor of Moscow region. Now, that shouldn't be confused with Moscow city, that's different, but Moscow region is still a big region in Russia when it comes to how high up the chain you are. He's been with Shoigu, I think, since Shoigu's days in the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations that usually covers the federal firefighter responses and disaster response. I think I've seen him by Russian media described as Shoigu's right-hand man. He was spared in the first purge of Shoigu's team, and he tried, I think, to make a political career out of it, tried to position himself as a regional senator. That failed, and now that he's being arrested on corruption charges, we have to look at the person who's really in charge of this corruption network, and that's Shoigu, with the expectation of people being that maybe Shoigu is the next to follow in terms of arrests, because I think Putin has soured on people stealing from the defense sector and views them more as traitors rather than just regular Russian corruption employees, corrupted state officials. So yeah, I think what we might see is Shoigu's position become in jeopardy and probably even an arrest of him, and more revelations about theft in the years when he was Minister of Defense. I think Russian outlets put the percentage chance of Shoigu actually falling from his post and being arrested at 98%. So yeah, it's not looking good for the former defense minister.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. And it's as you said, this is pretty much if you want to continue to go after Shoigu's network, then you would have to go after Shoigu himself. So it's a pretty high-profile arrest, and yeah, I guess we'll keep tabs on it for sure. So Stanimir, I think that brings us to your general update on the Russian economy. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and I'll start with some interesting news we had this week. We had the first decrease of the GDP growth, the first GDP contraction in Russia for a few years. The Russian Ministry of Economic Development, which has its own GDP tracking, said that under its estimates for January 2026, it decreased by 2.1% in annual terms. Now, the interesting thing is that also the index that is used by Eurostat as a proxy for what stats it uses to calculate Russia's GDP showed a decrease that's even greater at 3.2%. And I think we might have reached a point where Russia's GDP will not grow even by the 1% they're projecting for this year, the modest gains that they're projecting. I think the central bank still has it listed at, I think, between 1% and 1.6%, but I don't think they're going to reach even that. And this is an even bigger fall than the GDP growth slowing down to 0.8% in November of last year. Now we're probably going to see a decrease over the next few months. Also, I have to say again that this is January 2026. So there were less working days this year than there were in January 2025. But it's still a month-to-month comparison. It's still showing a decrease, and it's still a slowdown of the general economy. And we have secondary data like construction slowing down by over 30%. So this looks quite genuine. And this is, again, according to their stats. You should see it as objective stats if we could actually gain them with someone with access to the internal workings of the Russian statistical institutions. We would probably see an even greater decrease. The second big news of this kind was that the mayor of Moscow, Sobyanin, because revenue growth in Moscow when it comes to the budget didn't hit the planned 6.5% and came in at just 2%. So there was 4.5% missing. He's planning to cut 15% of Moscow's civil servants. The city is also going to reduce its investment program by 10%. And I have to point out that even before this, the planned deficit at the start of the year, based on the budget they passed, was around $6 billion. And Moscow has a budget in I think, over 5 trillion rubles. So a drop by 6.5% in revenue just balloons that deficit. And as we've seen in the previous weeks, when it comes to Russian regions, they're borrowing at around 20% from banks. Even though Moscow is probably having better borrowing chances, it's still running a heavy deficit of close to half a trillion rubles. When it comes to the Russian oil and gas revenue for February, we had the data. It came in at 432 billion rubles, which is 44% lower than in February 2025. It was only 40 billion rubles ahead of the abysmal January 2026. And oil and gas revenue was 153 billion below the plan. And thus, also because of that and because of January and February, the Russian Ministry of Finance managed to sell around 227 billion rubles in gold and foreign currency. This is sold from the National Welfare Fund, where when revenue can't actually make up the level that's set in the budget, they have a budget rule that they sell from the National Welfare Fund to get those funds. And also that caused the Russian Ministry of Finance to actually reevaluate its budget rule. So in March, they're not going to sell anything from the National Welfare Fund. They're going to make up for the deficit in other ways. But this is probably them understanding that this year they might actually run out of the National Welfare Fund and they have to resort to other measures to fund the budget deficits. The two that are being considered is actually printing money or sort of printing money by selling more debt to the banks. And the banks have one way to get this, usually through repo transactions from repo auctions from the Russian Central Bank. And those might grow to over 4 trillion or 5 trillion this year as well. Also, due to the conflict in the Middle East, the Russian wholesale prices of petroleum products rose significantly. The biggest increase was for Russian fuel oil, which went up on the first day of the week by 27% alone. This is the highest the price has been since November 2025. Also, Russian Ural oil started being sold without discounts to Brent. So basically it's saying it's being sold to India at a $4 to $5 premium to Brent versus a previous $13 discount. Now that's according to Western sources. I have to point out that when Russians talk actually about their discount to the Brent price, they're talking about $32 to $35 in terms of a discount to Brent. So difference of $17 to $18 will bring their 41 to 42 Ural price to close to the level of the budget, which is $59 per barrel. If they were also increasing their non-oil and gas revenue, which hasn't happened actually, to the point that they set it in the budget, they would be probably operating at just a minimum budget deficit set. But I think still they need oil prices to go up further to get to the point where they cover their expectations and they close their deficit that's already growing this year for the first 2 months. The other interesting thing that happened this week as a major news story is that the Russian Federal Anti-Monopoly Service declared the advertisement in Telegram and YouTube as illegal. They stated that Roskomnadzor is limiting access to them. Those are still not banned in Russia, but you have throttling of the internet. And because of this, they started a case last week against a blogger who advertised in YouTube. And the case against advertising in Telegram is going to follow very soon. So this will essentially force Russians to ditch their Telegram channels and YouTube channels because without revenue from advertisements, because advertisement is banned both for the bloggers and for the companies who spend the money on that. There's no revenue source for these channels, and they will probably migrate to Max, where they can still offer advertisements and make money off their channels. So the next major story is that the PMI came out for both manufacturing and construction. For not construction, manufacturing and services. For services, it grew at a slower rate than in February, than in January. when it was 53.1 points, and in February it fell down to 51.3 points, but it's still showing growth, not contraction. For manufacturing, it continues to be contracting, but not by as much as in the previous month. It's improved from 49.4 to 49.5. So the Russian manufacturing sector dutifully is still contracting. The final big story I have is that we learned through a secondary source that Russian domestic produced fiber optic is not a thing still. The Russian Ministry of Industry and Trade removed the regulations that require Russian companies to use domestically produced fiber optic, and it shifted their deadline for introduction to 2028 because it doesn't expect domestic production to recover from Ukrainian strikes before that. The primary site which was hit was the only Russian producer of domestic fiber optics, and most of the cable producers were actually sourcing their material from there. The rest were actually sourcing it from China. At the time, in 2024, when we have the data for the year, it managed to produce 30 to 40% of domestic consumption at around 4 million kilometers. However, currently, because of the war and civilian needs expanding, Russia actually needs around 20 million kilometers, but still not getting those 4 million kilometers from domestic sources is hurting them because prices of imported materials have gone up 5 to 6 times and they're still growing. So this is one thing that has essentially managed to, if not cripple, significantly reduce the ability of Russia to create fiber optic drones at low cost, and it has impacted their war effort significantly. Basically, they could have probably handled a third of their military production just with this factory alone, and now they have to import that from China at exorbitant prices because Chinese producers know they don't have another option. When we come to the rest of the news for banking, we have the increase of cash loans in February 2026 compared to 2025 by 40%, and compared to January, they still grew by 12% to 314 billion rubles. This means 1.7 million cash loans were taken out, and the average size being around 195,000 rubles. This is significant because this is another way Russians subsidize their shortfalls in their personal budgets, and we've seen the cost for utilities skyrocketing this year, so this could have been the cause for more loans. We will probably see the same thing happen in microfinancing, even though their volumes have been decreasing because there are new macroprudential measures to reduce how much Russians with heavy burdens in terms of debt can actually borrow from microfinancing organizations and banks. When it comes to metals, again, we have to go to the Middle East. The interruptions of the supply of aluminum might lead to an increase in the prices for Russian aluminum because the countries in the Middle East, which are on the Gulf Coast, accounted for 8% of global production, and more importantly, they were exporting 75% of it, so that's a big portion of the global market. When it comes to coal, we have a few news stories. First, the Rospatskaya coking coal company mine increased its net loss by 350% in 2025 to 53 billion rubles. And coal production stayed at the same levels of 2024, but due to the falling prices, revenue dropped 26% to 119 billion rubles. Again, if you have a revenue of 119 billion rubles and you lose 53 billion rubles, you're basically not going to be in the business for a long time. Probably they're going to close down very soon. And I have to say that this is even worse because this is coking coal. It's not low caloric thermal coal that's being used by power plants, which has an even harder time to make profits. We also had Magnitogorsk Iron and Steel Work close down one of its coking coal mines, again, for the same reason, because it's currently not profitable to produce their own coking coal, and the rising costs have made it cost more than the actual market price to buy coking coal from other sources. Their mine, in this case, produced just 1.2 million tons of coal. It's not a lot when you look at the entire coal sector, but when you look at just coking coal, that's a significant amount. And the workers from this mine have been directed to other mines that the company operates to, again, produce its own coking coal. And also, we had a new story for the sector as a whole. It's actually stopped shipping coal to China because the netback for 6,000 kilocaloric coal is between 1,700 and 2,040 rubles, when the extraction costs for coal in the Kuzbas, which is the main shipper of coal to China, are probably around 700 to 800 rubles higher, 2,700 to 2,800 rubles per ton. So at current prices, selling the coal and exporting it to China, when you factor in logistics costs, is going to be it's going to be sold at a loss. So they're hoping for an increase to send a big shipment. The other thing that's happening is because of the recent increase in derailments on the Russian railways and the poor weather in the Baltic, they're fearing that shipments through the Baltic or through Russian railways are going to be delivered late, and they will suffer penalties for both the ships that are going to load the coal and from the buyers because they didn't manage to deliver on time for their contracts. So that's another reason why they're delaying current shipments. And while there is an increase in the coal price due to the conflict in the Middle East, I would have to say that currently Chinese energy companies are going to go into maintenance in the second half of March 2026. And the country is also China that is as a whole, going to go into what they consider to be their off-season when it comes to thermal coal demand. So this is one case where Russian goods are not going to increase and stay at a high price for a long time when it comes to the conflict, and probably low prices will continue to be in effect for the next few months. When it comes to gas and oil, I have to mention that Slovakia's natural gas company has approved amendments to its long-term contract with Gazprom, and it increased the amounts of gas that it's going to buy from Gazprom. And this is because they want to stock up ahead of the upcoming EU ban of Russian energy, or they're just going to try to reject the ban altogether with this increase in purchases. We also have news on the recent lifting of the ban for purchase of Russian oil from India. We have two vessels that were carrying Russian oil change their destination. They were going to East Asia and waiting there for potential buyers from China or from East Asia for their oil. They're now redirecting to India with the delivery point of their oil being Indian refineries, which are more willing to buy Russian oil right now that there is a shortage. When it comes to the construction market, when it comes to Moscow and Moscow region in February 2026, the new housing that was offered on sale with discounts rose from 49% in 2025 to 81% in 2026. But I have to say that this comes only for housing that you buy immediately by paying the full price. So if you're buying with installment from the developer, or somehow you found a mortgage that's high enough to cover the cost of Moscow housing without actually bankrupting you, that will not apply. When it comes to interesting data points this week, we have the closure of the Middle East for Russian tourists. It led to a reduction in the sales of organized tours abroad by 22 to 30%. This is not just because the Middle East is closed. This is also because it was used as a hub for flights to other parts, like, for example, the Indian Ocean with the islands there. Currently, that's not available for cheap flights. You need to get flights for other parts of the world. So this is why Russians are reducing their purchases of tourist trips abroad. Also, we have for the tax industry, the Russian Ministry of Industry and Trade managed to publish its revised list of cars that can be used as taxis in Russia. I have to point out that they're 5 days late because they had to publish it before the new law went into effect on March 1st. They managed to get it by March 5th. The interesting part is that the WAZ Hunter and the WAZ Patriot didn't make the list because despite their being fully built in Russia. I don't think they're great cars, but given what cars they're actually giving the approval to be taxis, this is rather striking. And I have to point out that UAZ is currently struggling to sell enough of its cars and enough of its SUVs and light commercial vehicles. So this is another bad event for them. We also have the news for January 2026 on the agricultural equipment production. It was the worst month in the last 5 years for Russian domestically produced agricultural equipment. I have to point out that last year they fell by 40%, and now in January 2026 they fell by another 40%. And in some categories the decrease was by 85%, so a significant drop, despite the hopes of the industry that there will be a recovery in the farming sector. Also, we have data for February of 2026 from Autostat for new car sales. They were up by 2.5% to 80,030, but this is such a small growth that it led the market largely disappointed because they expected a bigger increase. And I have to say that, again, Lada, which is the domestic producer, faced a significant decrease of 22.5% to just 19,000 cars, and their market share shrunk by 8%. So this is, as the auto industry saying, one of the worst months for Russian domestic car producers in their last 20 years. And now when it comes to inflation and debt, we had inflation for the period of the 25th of February to the 2nd of March. It came in at 0.08%. And for March, the inflation is 0.03%, and for the year so far, 2.22%. Again, this is the official inflation, and I have to point out there was also an adjustment in January of 0.41%, which basically decreased the inflation figure for the year so far by around close to 0.5%, which is significant. And the last item of the news, we had again 2 auctions. In the first auction, they managed to sell 78 billion rubles in debt. The yield came in at 14.85%, so an increase compared to the previous week. And the second auction, they managed to sell just 50 billion rubles, and again, the yield came at 14.72%. So this is actually a decrease in the yield compared to the previous week. And I think this is it for me for this week.
Thank you, Stanimir, as always, for your update on the Russian economy, and we'll check in with you next week. So we have a few other things we should discuss. The first is that there was a recent 2 seizures of Russian Shadow Fleet vessels. Belgium seized, I believe, a second vessel, and Sweden also seized a grain transport that was operating as part of the Shadow Fleet. So yeah, it was a good development. We like to see the only way that the sanctions are going to be effective is if the Shadow Fleet isn't permitted to operate normally. I think a lot of countries have, up till now, kind of done their best to hand wave it or kind of look the other way because it's a big disruption to international shipping and stuff, and so they just try to hope it goes away. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of European countries and the U.S. and other countries start to take this more seriously and seize these rogue vessels. So yeah, hopefully we see more of it. And yeah, that's my general thoughts on it. Erlend, do you have any thoughts?
Well, other than the fact that the Swedish Coast Guard and police performed a very cool maneuver while initially boarding this with a rib and boarding ladder from the rear, which is a very difficult thing to do on a ship that is in transit. It's really great news to see that more things or more actions are being taken to stop Russia's Shadow Fleet, which is one of their main vessels of income. Let's say it like this.
Yeah, so that's good news. And next we have another boat news. An LNG tanker in the Mediterranean, a Russian one, exploded big time. um, and yeah, as far as I know, we don't have any independent evidence of what actually happened. There's a little debate about whether or not it was a drone or whether or not it was a mine that might have been placed inside the boat before, or the ship before it left the harbor. But in either case, it exploded, and yeah, it was I don't know, pretty big news if there wasn't a whole bunch of other stuff going on this week. Yeah, Erlend, is there anything else we can? Oh, I think the Russians said it was a drone. I'm not sure if the Ukrainians said anything. Does anyone know?
I think Sternenko said that it was a Ukrainian drone that hit it, a Ukrainian marine drone.
Which is
Uh,
quite interesting, right? Because that means they either transported it, basically smuggled it to the Mediterranean, or maybe constructed it somewhere else.
Yeah, and the other interesting story about this is that this wasn't just any LNG tanker carrying LNG from Russia. It actually had done ship-to-ship transfer earlier in February of 2026. It actually did a ship-to-ship transfer from an Arctic LNG tanker, and Russia doesn't have a lot of those. It also doesn't have a lot of LNG tankers available for this, but when they did it, they were actually using LNG from the Arctic 2 LNG project of Novatek, and that is completely sanctioned. So because the cargo that it was carrying was heavily sanctioned and was going to just one specific terminal that receives LNG from that project in Beihai in China, I think I'm saying that correctly, this means that probably there's not going to be any sort of profit for anyone in this, from insurance or other cases. And further tankers that actually load near Murmansk from the same way and carry the LNG through the Mediterranean can just be hit by such Ukrainian drones, and they have no legal way to actually contest this, because this is a sanctioned goods transport. So yeah, if this keeps happening, Ukraine will have effectively enforced the sanctions on Arctic LNG2, which the US is failing to do. Only the UK has actually extended the sanctions to the terminal that actually receives this cargo in China. So yeah, this is a good development from that point of view.
Yeah, I think the Ukrainians are very clearly putting this is like a new level of pressure on Russia in terms of their international shipping, and yeah, it's very crucial to their energy market post sever with Europe. So yeah, well, I guess keep an eye on new Ukrainian strikes on these types of ships. Oh, go ahead.
One last thing to add: the cargo wasn't also cheap. It cost around $40 to $60 million. The cargo that was lost on top of the ship.
Yeah, so it's a big blow, I would say, to the Russian shadow fleet. So yeah, and then there's a couple other things, but this is like a big topic, so I'm going to do my best to like try to zoom out a bit. It's been going on for a couple weeks, of course. There's been sort of a dispute between Ukraine and Hungary, I guess. I would argue somewhat initiated by Hungary, but I'll try to just kind of focus on facts. So there's a pipeline that goes through Hungary that Russia has, or that Ukraine has, that is connected to Russia, and it is how Hungary's been getting their oil and gas, and the Druzhba pipeline, and that got struck, as far as I understand, by Russia, and nobody disputes that. So as a result, no more oil and gas for Hungary. Hungary, of course, has alternatives. Croatia has stepped up and said, hey, there's a way we could get you guys some energy resources if you want. And as far as we know, Hungary hasn't really cooperated or meaningfully taken them up on that offer. And of course, they've had many years now to seek alternatives in an environment where the two countries that they rely on to cooperate to send them, energy resources are currently in a war. So as a result, Hungary has sort of demanded that Ukraine fix the pipeline to restore cheap energy to Hungary, and also Slovakia. And the Ukrainians have basically been resistant to that. I would say Zelensky early on basically just said, "I don't want to risk anyone's life repairing this pipeline." Basically, that was kind of his answer. Um, Orban got, I would just say, increasingly angry, and he made kind of Zelensky a bigger focus of his election campaign. And the Hungarian elections are about 30 days away. He's widely projected to lose the election. And this seems to be kind of an effort by him to really create some kind of a crisis mentality before the election that might kind of get him out of that uh, those losing poll numbers. So this kind of all has culminated. I should also mention Slovakia has also been pretty upset about this. They said they were going to stop allowing imports from Slovakia of electricity for Ukraine. So that was what they did. Luckily, the winter's mostly over, and Ukraine still manages to have some generation capacity through a combination of renewables and nuclear. So they're, it won't affect them that badly. Obviously, it's not good news, but they could have been a worse time that it could have happened. So anyway, back to Hungary. It's become kind of a major election issue now for Orban. Orban sort of started muttering that if the Ukrainians weren't going to fix this, he was going to start causing serious problems for Ukraine. So the first thing he did was he vetoed a 90 billion aid package that I discussed at some length for a while. That it was critically important for Ukraine. It's currently vetoed by Hungary. And as a result, Ukraine doesn't need that money right away, but by April, they really could use that money. And yeah, after April, it starts getting kind of becoming a problem. So right now, the EU doesn't have a clean mechanism. It's possible for, I would say, countries in the EU to come up with an alternative to this 90 billion plan they created. But basically, that was the most straightforward path. I assume Hungary had previously agreed to it, and that's, it got passed. But as a result, because it involves taking credit directly in the EU's purview, it's very difficult to have a different type of EU-wide mechanism to do that that doesn't require this unanimity, so that Hungary can't veto. So the alternative is to come up with like a mechanism maybe outside the EU, among a bunch of big stakeholders, Germany, France, etc., UK. But it would take a long time. And again, Ukraine really needs this money by April. So as far as we know, this is not like confirmed, but there were key figures in the EU government that were basically urging Ukraine to just give Hungary what they want. Just fix the pipeline, get it done, and then they'll stop vetoing this $90 billion. Do they like that they have to do it? No, but this $90 billion is really critical. So that seemed to be, again, I'm not suggesting it was the EU's position itself, but there were some important figures that in the EU that were at least communicating to the Ukrainian side, if we can that's the easiest solution to this. There's no other simple solution, and the money is needed. Ukraine's response to this, I would argue, has been negative. Zelensky has made several remarks about it. He basically at first he was a bit more, I would argue, diplomatic. Again, he was saying, I don't want to risk the lives of the Ukrainians to fix this pipeline that helps the Russians. That seemed like a more, I don't know, neutral or reasonable stance. After that, he started saying things more like, I don't really want to fix it, like things like that. And he said something that I would argue that the Hungarians like mistranslated or misunderstood. He said something to the effect of like, well, I should give some people his address to go talk to him. And the Hungarian media, or I guess Orbanist, media, portrayed that as like Zelensky threatening Orban. But I think he was just saying that they can talk to him in Hungarian. I think that was like Zelensky's point. But the point is, all this like noise from Zelensky, this recent stuff, has really like fed into this information operation, I guess you'd call it, that Hungary's been doing, where they attempt to resuscitate Orban's chances in the election. In addition to that, Orban recently there was a Hungarian delegation that went to Russia. They basically came back with like a Russian election rigging wunderkind. I don't know this guy's deal, but yeah. So like I would argue that Orban's kind of views this as like a fight for survival, and he's now resorting to pretty like serious measures to like try to survive. So that all culminates in what happened most recently, a bank robbery, effectively. So there were the easiest way to explain all this is there's a national bank in Ukraine. They have branches in like all parts of Ukraine. Because there's a war going on, a lot of Ukrainians don't trust like electronic systems, right? In 2022, a lot of that stuff failed, and Ukrainians had to rely on cash and crypto and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so as a result, a lot of Ukrainians don't trust just electronic stuff alone. They like cash. And so that has resulted in Ukraine creating various ways to get cash in and out of the country. It's very common and simple. The EU has like very standard procedures for this, and those procedures were followed. You can see those slips there were from an Austrian bank, and so the Ukrainians were taking some Austrian money and bringing it into Ukraine. The Hungarian counter-terrorist police apprehended the 7 bank employees and seized the money and the vehicles. And they basically made the claim that this is a Ukrainian money laundering operation. They said that these people were involved in like an illicit, money operation going on in Ukraine. And yeah, that's been kind of the spin that the Hungarian press supporting Orban has stated. And the Ukrainians, of course, have objected to this very strongly. These are like legitimate employees of this bank. They went to an Austrian bank. They did all the paperwork like above board. They got some armored cars and they took some money. They were taking money back to Ukraine. It has resulted in a big escalation in this situation, and Orban has leaned on this incident even more in his re-election campaign. I would argue that it's effectively a political stunt. The 7 employees were released, which is kind of strange to happen if there was in fact a belief that they were like involved in smuggling or illegal activity. There's a lot of like misinformation about the incident itself circulating online. I had a little bit of a post that got kind of popular, and got swarmed by bots, and they were talking about how like, oh, it was southbound to Serbia or some nonsense. I don't know what they're talking about, but it wasn't. It was going from Austria to Ukraine through the most direct route, which is Hungary. There's maybe a reasonable case to be made that because of the current diplomatic arguments between Hungary and Ukraine, that it wasn't wise to bring a bunch of money through Hungary. But I have to assume, like any other sane person, that the EU laws would have protected these people from this happening. Like, you can't. This is literally a bank robbery. It is a legal transfer between two banks being like seized by another EU country. So I would argue that Hungary's created like a real legal problem for the EU, and they're going to have an answer for this. Otherwise, it could set a very like dangerous precedent in terms of how like EU laws work. So yeah, this is a pretty serious escalation by Orban. The election's in about 30 days, and I would just say that like it's really important that there's a new government in Hungary for Ukraine, because this 90 billion is critically important to their budgetary function, and we're going to see like real damage start happening in April unless this all just kind of sorts itself out and Ukraine gets that approved. And of course, it would be nice also if Hungary and Ukraine got along better, because Hungary wasn't constantly actively demanding completely unreasonable things from Ukraine, like give up all your land and give us free, energy. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it about it for me. Do you guys have any thoughts on the wider situation going on?
Well, I guess we should expect that more and more outrageous, crazy things are going to happen within and around Hungary, because Orban seems to be quite desperate.
Yeah, I think this is very early on in the Putin regime. They I want to say like Estonia or some random country like took down some war memorials, and the Russian using like political strategists and stuff figured out that if you just make a huge deal about this and like make a bunch of crazy claims, then people it kind of sticks with people. Like, I don't know, this seems very like they came back with this Russian political guy. He was like, here's what you do. You cook up a crazy scheme like this. And, I'm not suggesting the Hungarians couldn't have come up with it on their own. Orban himself said something like, well, if you take, stuff from us, we're going to take stuff from you. So maybe he just sat his guys down and said, let's rob a bank. But it's also possible that the Russians gave them advice on how to like maximize the political benefit from it or something like that. So I would say you can maybe see Russia's hand here, although obviously I don't have any direct proof. So yeah, I think that's it about that. So I think you had a little update for us, Erlend, from our friend Audax. Is that right?
Yeah. Thank you. I'll open the screen. So last stream we had Audax giving us an update about Konstantinivka, and at the time he detailed, he gave us very good insights on the consequences of one dam being blown up, which had created enormous difficulties with logistics on the western side of Konstantinivka. And this week, the Russians blew up another dam. So that is further proof of the Russians aiming to dislodge Ukrainian logistics and create a very difficult situation on the ground in Konstantinivka. And you can see he in his tweet he mapped out the dam and also where the water is flowing. And this is obviously not an easy task for the Ukraine to overcome, because now you have one side of the river flooded and the other. So that is a worrisome report. We also discussed during the last stream if this situation will create problems when it comes to giving, because there's been volunteers transporting food and clean water to civilians that still live in Konstantinivka. And we discussed last stream if this is going to be a problem for them, that the logistics has been cut off partially because of the flooding. And this week we also got some reports from Ukrainian outlets where they basically describe that handing out food and water is becoming increasingly a problem, because the soldiers that would, so basically some of the soldiers that were rotating in and out were bringing supplies to civilians in addition to volunteers, and these supply runs are now being deprioritized because traveling by car in Konstantinivka is now so dangerous that it's very difficult, which means that obviously the civilian situation in Konstantinivka and the villages around is going to be deteriorating very fast. When you don't get food and water, it's going to be very difficult. So hopefully these people will eventually evacuate. It is incredible to me that civilians are still in Konstantinivka after all this time, when it's been under constant bombardment by the Russians. But this has been a repeating pattern. Civilians seem to either stay to the very last moment or actually never leave at all and stay until the Russians come and occupy it. Yep.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for that update, Erlend. I guess maybe one more thing we should talk about before we move to Q&A is just like the general, I want to keep it focused on its implications for Russia and Ukraine, but this general Iran business. I think that I'd say the two main pieces of news that have come out about it that are important are, number one, is that Russia now is getting a reprieve on the oil market. They're still not in the best shape, but Stanimir, you said that they now oil is enough that they can sustain their budget. It like meets their minimum projected plan, right?
Yeah, based on what I've seen of prices and the reduction of the discount, yeah, they're at that point.
So yeah, I would say it's benefited Russia in that way. Obviously, long term, if Iran can be taken away from Russia's orbit, Iran has been collaborating with Russia and giving them missiles, although none have been used in Ukraine. We know that there have been transfers of missiles. Obviously, the Shahed drone is an Iranian creation, but it's also been like enhanced by Russia. So we've seen a lot of back and forth where they're sharing developments on drone technology. So long term, it would be obviously in everyone's interest if Iran wasn't allied, for lack of a better term, or aligned, I guess is maybe a word. They're not going to help them in this situation they've gotten themselves into, but having Iran not be willing to cooperate with Russia on these matters would be beneficial. But in the short term, I would argue it's kind of benefited Russia in the sense that it really saved them on the energy market because of the Strait of Hormuz and the now lack of production coming out of there. So then on the Ukrainian side, I would say that the Ukrainians are doing their best to demonstrate that they have created reliable, high quality, cutting edge technologies that can help deal with this Iranian threat of these Shahed drones. They've been working on a method to intercept them. We've had scholars on here that study this topic. It's very complex. It took a long time to perfect the technology to intercept Shaheds with drones. But now that it's done, Ukraine has discussed sharing that technology by selling weapons to the UAE and to, I think, Kuwait, some other Gulf countries. So there's already been talk of like high interest in Ukrainian anti-drone technologies. And I would say that the Ukrainians, for their part, are willing to engage in that because, number one, their defense industry is still not at capacity. It's underinvested. So that means that they have, if these UAE countries, if the UAE and these other countries want drones and they are willing to give Ukraine hard capital, then that's good for Ukraine. Like they've got unused production that they can use on those drones, and they still get capital for more investment. So it's not like cutting into Ukraine's own supply of drones to give the UAE some drones. Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing that it's positive is it might give Ukraine some leverage in various types of negotiations. The Arabs, like the UAE, has been very beneficial for Ukraine in getting prisoner of war exchanges done. And so that might help motivate them to, be even more helpful in that regard. And also, of course, various countries in that region have been key third-party countries, as they're called, in evading sanctions. We have tons of situations where like stuff has gone through these countries and then gone to Russia through a circuitous route. So obviously that raises the price for Russia, having all these middlemen, but it's given Russia access to key technologies for missile production and other types of production that it otherwise wouldn't have. So it seems like Ukraine is using this as an opportunity to try to get closer with the Arab countries to have like a discussion, or I should say the Gulf countries, to have a discussion about maybe, helping with them with a few issues in terms of what their neutrality means. So yeah, I think that's kind of my hot take. Do you guys have any general thoughts about like the implications of the recent intervention in Iran, or whatever, war, I guess, whatever you want to call it? What implications that has for Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I would say that more to the point that you brought up, that circular roads for Russia. One thing that Russians are now expecting is, apart from the RAM shortage, another reason for electronics to go up in price in Russia is because they used to source them from the UAE when it comes to parallel imports of brands. So yeah, that's a big hit for Russians who want to buy, let's say, a laptop, certain device made from European countries. That was their source. For the Chinese devices, it was easy for the Far East, but for Western imports, it was from the UAE.
Yeah, so it very well might close off a kind of significant channel for Russia. Any other thoughts on this stuff, guys?
Well, the Ukrainians, or Zelensky, actually confirmed today as well that they will send experts, or basically drone interception crews, to train personnel in the Middle East. That's interesting. Having the drones itself is not going to be, helping the Arab states in any way or form unless they actually know how to use them. This is very difficult. We had people from Come Back Alive here on the stream talking about how difficult drone interceptions are, and people in the basement studying this for a very long time. And it took Ukraine basically 2 years to master intercepting Shahed with FPV drones. So it's going to be interesting for me, at least, to see how successful this is going to be. In my opinion, Ukraine probably need to leave a presence of instructors there for some time in order to actually have any effect of this. And in this case, because of the times we live in, Ukraine really needs to for this to be a success. Ukraine needs to have some cool videos of drone interceptions happening over the Hormuz Strait or in Dubai or something like that. And I'm a little bit doubtful if there's going to be a lot of success early on, but we will see.
Yeah, I think a lot of people try to simplify the drone problem, I guess, just to again simplify it. The problem of these low cost munitions that can be launched in large swarms and overwhelm air defense. They try to say, well, you just need equipment. You just put a big machine gun around every hard or soft target, and you solve the drone problem, as it were. But the truth is, it's a much bigger kind of organizational and administrative problem. Zone deconfliction. I don't know the exact terminology, but this is like a really complicated topic. It's something that NATO has spent like a ton of effort on to make sure that it rarely happens, and it takes a lot of coordination. And as Erlend said, it took the Ukrainians a long time to do this because it's not obviously equipment is important, but the U.S. does have systems that could do enough to prevent the problem. It's just a matter of organization and putting the right trained people with the right equipment in the right spot at the right time. So still a big problem, obviously, but I think that hopefully this recent experience has given NATO armies something to think about in terms of they're still probably not there yet with conceiving of the strategic threat that drones present, and I would argue also in terms of infantry, the tactical threat. And I think we'll see some adaptation. I'm not completely, trying to make people panic about it, but I think there was this has shown that maybe some people were a bit overconfident in terms of it being a different case for NATO militaries. So any other thoughts on this before we move to Q&A?
No, but I have a different topic
Oh,
that
gotcha.
I would
Okay.
like to spend a little bit of time on. So, yeah, so this week, the UK presented their repair facilities in Ukraine that they've set up, where they're, I guess, repairing some of the UK donated systems, maybe some other stuff as well. But in the video that they attached to the tweet, and also some of the pictures that have been published in newspapers, they basically do not do any effort at all to obscure what kind of building the repair facility is in. The video was very extensive, showing features in the repair facility, which would make a geolocation almost 100% certain. So they basically revealed the location of a military facility in Ukraine. They said even, I think in the article or in the video, that it's in Western Ukraine, which immediately is going to narrow the search down for the intelligence analysts that will geolocate the facility. The video was then later removed after people on Twitter encouraged them to take it down. But in my opinion, the reaction and the aftermath has been absolutely ridiculous by the Minister of Defense in the UK. There's been no apology, no reaction. I hope something will happen on Monday. In my honest opinion, people need to be fired in this. In these kind of cases, they've demonstrated that they are not capable of following security guidelines that I am certain that the Minister of Defense of the UK has in place when it comes to public communication and making sure that you don't reveal secrets, which could be of tactical, operational, or strategic targets. And in this case, that's exactly what they did. In my honest opinion, Luke Pollard, the Minister of, I think, the Industries and the Defense Readiness, a part of the MOD in the UK, needs to go. And he needs to publicly apologize, because this is an absolute... I'm not going to swear on stream. It's really, really bad. So there's been a lot of discussion about this on Twitter, but I wanted to highlight it for those who are not on that site. And this is a learning lesson for anyone else that is either a public entity or volunteer traveling to Ukraine. You need to be really, really careful when you publish pictures, and even blurring, just light normal blurring, is not enough. You need to make sure that the background is not possible to identify if you're in any of these facilities, and make sure that you ask people who are either experts in geolocation or expert in intelligence if it's enough, if you've done enough to make sure that the location is not revealed.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize if you have a detailed video like this, it's pretty trivial for a geolocator to like sit down and really narrow it down and figure it out with like publicly available information. And in this time we live in, obviously though, for like the Ministry of Defense of the UK, it's like inexcusable. But I think for most people, like it's in general, I think they underestimate how easy it is these days. But yeah, it's a important point, Mr. Erland. So I think. Oh, go ahead.
Just to highlight how crucial this is, in August when Firepoint made their whole PR release about the Flamingo missile being produced, they published very detailed pictures of the facility. A lot of people were pointing out that this is ridiculous to post. And Zelensky 3 weeks ago confirmed that the production or final assembly line was struck by the Russians and it set back production for quite a long time. So it just highlights how important this is. We cannot obviously confirm that it was because of the pictures, but we can assume that was the reason.
Yeah. So this is real consequences for this stuff for sure.
Can I?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Gal.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a funny coincidence. It doesn't have to mean that it's actually related to what the British did or something, but on the same day, and I really find this a funny coincidence. On the same day, the German Bundeswehr, so the German army, updated their website regarding regulations on when taking pictures and videos on military sites in Germany is allowed and what to consider when doing it and why it's important. That happened on the same day, a few hours after the British deleted their tweet with the video.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so it's important, whether or not it was related. It sounds like it might have been. It's important stuff. Okay, we're going to Q&A. You guys got to let me go to Q&A. So I think the first question, I'm not sure the specific incident we're talking about, but Mitch asked if American intelligence was involved. I assume this is about the tanker blowing up in the Mediterranean. We don't know. It's something that the CIA director possibly mentioned, at least according to one media source that did like an in-depth analysis of the Trump cabinet's views on Ukraine. But yeah, I don't know. We definitely don't have any evidence, of course, of any American involvement in targeting choices as of now. Next question, I think. Yeah, have we seen these new UAVs with these new possibilities? So
They corrected to UGVs, by the way, in the next comment. So
okay,
they meant UGVs.
right. So UGVs, meaning the carrier thing that I mentioned. So the Ukrainians said that they released a new ground drone. I'm trying to use like normal terms so people don't get confused. A ground drone that is like a drone platform for air drones, like a little carrier, right? A little ground carrier, or a dock, you might call it if this was something you bought at Sharper Image. I don't know. So that's basically the Ukrainians said it can extend the range of these drones. It can serve as a little communications platform, charging station. It extends their operating capabilities. It can hold more ammunition, I assume, and supply and stuff. So the Ukrainians have released, as far as I know, 2 drones like this, and one of them uses fiber optics. So I assume there's like a little ground drone with a little spool, and it sends the air drone off with a fiber optic, like a little fiber optic kite, and it does its thing and then either comes back or doesn't. So that's one that they've released, and then this new one, I don't know, they didn't mention if it was fiber optic or not. I was looking for B-roll. So the question was, have we seen any videos of this? I personally searched for a video of it just to show you guys for B-roll for the news. I couldn't find anything. And the best I could do was find something in the same family, this GNOME, I guess GNOM as the Ukrainians call it, platform, but it had a machine gun on it and like a spool. So I don't know if that was it, or they called it the GNOME 2. So I haven't seen any personally footage of like a ground-based drone carrier. Erlend, have you ever come across anything like that?
Well, we've seen UGVs launching FPV drones, but I must admit that I haven't really seen necessarily the battlefield footage of it, or not at least much.
Yeah, so it seems like the Ukrainians are still in the testing phase of this technology. We might see more, but yeah, I don't think we've seen anything that would allow us to like any kind of purpose-built ground-based drone carriers. I don't think we've seen yet. But presumably, if they're actually used extensively on the battlefield, the footage will leak out sometime. Although, if Russia really closes down the Telegram loophole, we might start running low on footage. I guess we'll see. So yeah, next question is United 24 made a post about Russia changing tactics to deplete Patriot missile stockpiles. How critical is this? And I've also heard other news about depleted stockpiles. So big question. I think Colby would usually be the one to field this. Instead, I guess I'll try to channel Colby. I think Colby would say that this recent stuff with Iran has really shown the shoot the archer, not the arrow theory or school of thought that he's been talking about for a long time on this platform, which is all you can do with air defense. Air defense is never going to be this perfect shield that will protect you from the enemy attacking you with strategic weapons. It's not possible. The enemy can just throw too much explosive metal in the air for you to ever just be able to swat it all away with perfect precision. Instead, what your air defense is supposed to do is keep most of your force intact while you go and destroy the enemy's capability to launch. If you don't do that, you're basically fighting a losing battle. You're fighting with one hand tied behind your back. And as a result, I think that Colby's general answer when questions like this come up, is Ukraine running out of Patriots and things like that, is the short answer is yes. The Ukrainians have to be very careful about what they prioritize with Patriot because there's not enough missiles to go around. They've done their absolute best to try to get more, in terms of availability from other countries. But Europe has been going back and forth about 30 Patriots missiles for a while now, the newest kind, but still. So, that should put into perspective like how rare these things are. And they often take multiple interceptors to reliably take down a single missile. So, that's the general point is Ukraine needs to be given strategic weapons to strike back at Russia's ability to strike them. Otherwise, there is no amount of air defense that can be given to Ukraine that would protect them fully. And hopefully that has been demonstrated in the recent contest between, or the recent war between, the United States and its Arab partners and Iran. That's kind of been the general story. There was a huge attack from Iran the first week, or the first couple days, I should say, the first 2 days. And in that time, American and Allied air defense really was struggling. And it looks like the Iranians even managed to get a couple important hits in. But after that, most of the obviously Allied force was intact, and they were able to go after their launchers and their capacity. And, we saw like this exponential curve downward of attacks, so that now the Iranians are letting out maybe 30 drones or something like that, and maybe a missile or two, versus, the first day, I want to say 1,800 objects in the sky. So that really, I think, has been a really strong demonstration of Colby's point. And so if we want to advocate for Ukraine, probably the strongest thing we can do is give Ukraine long-range strike munitions like Taurus and Tomahawk and other weapons like that. So does anyone else have any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is to take out Russian production facilities for sure. Will it happen? No. or maybe it will, but it will take much more time than Ukraine has before they need to replenish their stocks of especially PAC-3 interceptors. And from my point of view, or my thoughts around this is basically that we are unfortunately going again into a situation where Ukraine will have to limit their use of PAC-3 to purely strategic and operational targets, which means that they will have to probably let ballistic missiles hit civilian objects to a much more extent in order to drag their current stockpiles as long as possible, to make sure that they last as long as possible for the really important high value targets. So this is going to be bad, because already before the war in Iran, Ukraine did not receive enough PAC-3 interceptors, even if there were agreements in this agreement between NATO, European NATO countries, and the US of buying munitions from the US. They have been delayed, both for PAC-3 interceptors, but also especially for AIM-120 missiles, for NASAMS, and for the F-16s. And unfortunately, what is happening in the Middle East will almost certainly impact the supply of these munitions to Ukraine for a pretty long time.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's definitely going to be a much higher demand, and people are going to be more skeptical to give Ukraine more interceptors because, they feel like they either need theirs or they're now, more valuable, et cetera. So it's definitely not there. Ukraine could always use more interceptors, and hopefully we can also, on top of that, raise a discussion about their ability to strike Russian targets, either production or missile deployment sites. So yeah, I think that's that question. Anyone else before we move on to the next question? Okay, so Stanimir, it's a question for you, which is how much of Russian exports goes directly or indirectly through Iran?
I don't think much of the critical exports go through Iran. They have other routes. I think I saw something about 60% decrease in, I think, food imports or exports, but that's just for Iran itself because of the closing down of everything. I don't think it's much dependent on Iran. It's much more dependent on countries around Iran, which might currently be impacted, but not so much on Iran itself.
Oh, well, there you go. Let's see. Okay.
Just to add something, you have to remember that Iran is also a heavily sanctioned country. It's not a good route to export things through another sanctioned entity.
Yep. Thanks, Stanimir. And then I think the next question is Thierry, which says, do you think that Trump will try to leave the conflict, I assume in Iran, and leave a big mess for the Arab countries and Israel? And I wonder how it could impact the oil market for Russia. I think we probably can't speculate about what's going to happen next regarding Trump and Iran. It could be a sustained campaign for weeks. Could be that Trump tomorrow decides he's done what he's done and he's going to go home. That being said, if the oil market, or if the whole thing remains a mess, I guess is the best way to put it, and for lack of better simplification, the Strait of Hormuz isn't open back up, the effect on the oil market will be huge, and it will benefit Russia. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't know if Russia could rebuild their economy off of it, but they would long term, or I guess medium term is probably more accurate. Medium term, they would no longer be facing a situation where they couldn't meet their basic budget requirements. I think that would be my short answer. Stanimir, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we have a window of 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 1 to 2 weeks even, under which the Hormuz Strait has to be open for LNG and oil before Russia starts making major gains. Because this is just how much oil they have sitting in tankers off the coast of Asia. But yeah, this could lead to major gains for Russia if the Hormuz Strait isn't open. And if they can open it while continuing the operation, if they can open it by ending the operation, that doesn't matter. But what matters for Russia is that the Hormuz Strait remains closed for oil and LNG, because also a big portion of the LNG market is dependent on countries in the Gulf.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good topic. Okay, Erlend, do you understand this question?
Yeah, so basically, this user Gufsevik says he's a civilian FPV pilot, and that in some of the FPV community, there's been some tests revealing significant latencies on some FPV goggles like the SkyZone 040 Pro and 04X Pro. These goggles are both widely used by Ukrainian drone teams, and in my opinion, having up to 40 milliseconds extra latency would likely significantly complicate target approaches and general maneuverability of the UAV. And then the question is, do you know how procurement of such equipment is handled and the potential avenues of contact to make sure that this newly discovered issue is taken into account? Well, one thing I can definitely reassure you of is that the whole, let's call it the whole community and industry around everything drone related in Ukraine is very big and also full of people who do small innovations on existing products like firmware updates, hardware changes on existing commercial products. And they also do enormous amount of testing to have the best equipment available. That doesn't mean that some pilots might be using this specific equipment, but the knowledge about these sort of technicalities is very high, and also likely, I would say, the community in Ukraine is the one where most knowledge about the specific technicalities exist in the world, or at least the country where you find most expertise on the subject. And they do a lot of testing, so I wouldn't be concerned about the specific issue. But thank you for the question, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions. Anything else we should cover before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just hope Starmer fires Luke Pollard from his ministry post because I'm still really angry about this thing. It puts people's lives in danger, and things like this needs to have consequences. In my honest opinion, the best thing to do is to set an example of things like this. Fire the minister, make him do a public apology, and fire everyone involved in the whole communication staff that posted this thing, because they are, per definition, incompetent to the role. When you're a communications officer or a civilian doing communications for the Ministry of Defense, the most important task is to make sure that everything that you publish will be safe, so that it doesn't violate any of the secrecy laws, which is one thing, but also security laws and regulations that are in place to make sure that these fuck-ups don't happen, and it is an enormous fuck-up.
Well, there you go. I think Erlend's thoughts on the matter are pretty clear. Thank you, Erlend. So now I guess we move to me saying, hey, on the website, we're looking for a social media manager.
I almost forgot it. And I have it ready on the screen, though.
What a segue from this social media manager should be fired and flogged
Hey.
And speaking of, we want a social media manager.
Hey, if you know how UpSec works, then please become our new social media manager. Is that the pitch?
I guess my standards aren't that high. I mean, I obviously will. I think it would be part of it would be on us to prevent even OPSEC information going through the social media manager if we were so inclined. But that being said, yeah, if you're interested, we basically just need someone to help run our Twitter account, our Blue Sky account, maybe a few other accounts if you're so inclined. We have a presence on those places, but we aren't super engaged with our audience there. So it might be helpful. And if you're interested, we could use your help, and you can apply on the website Tochnyi.info. You can see at the top there it says join Tochnyi, and you can click there and tell us what you're all about, and we'll do our best to evaluate your application and hopefully hire you, because yeah, it'd be really nice to have a social media manager. Of course, check out the website in general. We have lots of great articles and maps and interactive stuff. So if you want to check out a lot of really in-depth research being done by, not everyone at Tochnyi is on the broadcast every week. There's lots and lots of people who contribute to various research projects that we have on the website. So it's a cool place to work, in my opinion, and you should check it out. And that's pretty much that. So now I suppose it's time for me to wrap up. Thank you everyone for attending the broadcast. We appreciate the people who tune in live. Thanks for all your questions. Your feedback really helps us calibrate what we should talk about. Thank you, of course, to our illustrious panel, which includes myself, Stanimir, Erlend, and Mr. Gao. Thank you, of course, to the audience that watches after the fact. We know not everyone can be here live. And it's been a great broadcast, and we'll see everyone next week. Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava.
On behalf of the brave.